So let's talk about the player who has the slice problem first. So for a right-handed golfer, that would be that golf ball, maybe even starting a little bit left and then curving significantly to the right. So in such an amount that it's actually detrimental to our game. So let's look at what might cause that. And we're going to start off with the most influential thing we've mentioned, and that's the face. So when we looked at the original, the laws that we talked about before, we said, okay, well, it's between the direction of the path, the club head travel, and the face. But that face is about 75% of the influence with an iron, nearly 80% with a driver. So let's look at the face first when we have those players having those problems, those left to right, those big slice patterns from a right-handed golfer's perspective. And what we'll do is we're going to create some checkpoints here in terms of looking at that face. So what I want you to do is get set up, and as you start back, as you get to about shaft parallel in the backswing, I want you to have a quick look back at where that club head is. And for some players at that point in time, that club face, the toe of that club might be getting a little bit open, so rolling away. So if I look at the toe part of this golf club, where is it pointing? Now what I prefer to see in essence is the toe part pointing a little bit up in this direction, okay? So more up towards the peak of my cap up here. What I would prefer not to see is the toe of the golf club pointing more past or behind my right shoulder here, okay? So that toe pointing up in that direction. That means that that face has actually got a little bit open in backswing. Now as we continue on into that backswing and we look up top again, we see the toe of that golf club pointing very much down to the ground. That club face is open. So now from that position, as I swing down and start working my way across the golf ball, I'm going to get that open face position, that club head traveling left of that face because it's so open, and therefore creating that slice pattern. So the first checkpoint really, if I'm a player that has that slice pattern, again, looking to get into those kind of 70 scores, got to improve it, look at the face. Let's checkpoint that face. So as we go back to this situation again, I just got a mid-arm. We could be doing this with any club, right? The same thing applies. As I go back, I want to see the toe of that golf club pointing more towards my cap here. That's my feeling, right? As I look at it. Now, if I look back down here, where do I want it pointing? I want it pointing up into that corner up here, okay? So I want it pointing up more towards, let's say, my right ear rather than behind towards my right shoulder. So if I can get that position, I'm going to hold that position up top. So again, as I get up top, you'll see it's in the same position. That's open, that's square, that's closed. I don't want it in this position, okay? So as I come down, again, same position. I see that toe, that golf club pointing more diagonally across, not open here. I get that position, and then from here, I can just chip it through. So very, very importantly, I gotta get that club face in a good spot. Another way of kind of feeling this can be a nice little fun way. If I get set up and I just pull the golf club through my hand, just so I'm gripping it right down on the steel with my left hand, and I even go a little bit further. And what I'm gonna do is gonna grip the face with my right hand and hold it there. So as I go back, I'm gonna hold it in position. As I go up here, I'm gonna hold it in position. And as I go down, I'm gonna hold it in position. So I know the face hasn't twisted open or closed as I've done that. So again, just starting off here, back it's in position, here it's in position, here it's in position. And then I can just extend the golf club down and get that same awareness. So here in position, here in position, good in position, good in position. Okay, so really looking at the face first. That's very, very important. Why might that face open is something we're going to discuss in the next video. So we mentioned that the face opening and backswing is a big influencer for those players, those right-handed players that have that excessive left to right, or indeed for any player that slices the golf ball, that face opening and backswing is a big influence. Now we've talked a little bit about ways we can kind of manage it or even checkpoint it in the last video. What's some influences that might be causing it? And to do that, we got to look a little bit at setup and a little bit at the grip. And when we have players that excessively have that face opening and backswing, generally speaking, when we look at their left hand, their lead hand, it can be quite flat on the golf club. So in a very, very flat position here, meaning you wouldn't see a lot of the backhand of my left hand. That would be more of a neutral grip, let's say, and this would be a strong grip. So that left hand being very, very flat on the golf club. And what that means is also this forearm gets very, very flat. And from that position, what it likes to do as I go into my backswing is to roll into where it feels more comfortable. So you can actually see it start to rotate as it goes back and try to put a little bit of a hinge in my left wrist to allow me to hinge the golf club up in my backswing. So I'm going from this position where I'm very flat with my lead hand into a position that I feel more comfortable I can move the club from. But to get there, I have to roll that face open, and therefore now that face is already open very early in the swing. So when I'm looking at that, there are many players who have that lead hand position, and do it very well. But what they do is as they go back, they actually have this lead wrist bow down and flex, right? And I'm talking about players like Colin Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, many players like that who have weak lead hands. It's very tricky for the club golfer to do that. So what we would do from there is we'd actually strengthen that left hand, that lead hand. And what I mean by that is as you would grip that golf club, feeling like as you get your left hand in front of you here, the thumb pointing at the camera, point the thumb towards the club face. So if you start here pointing thumb straight at the camera and then point the thumb at the club face, that puts you into a good position. It turns that forearm. Now place the grip on the handle into a much better position. So now you should be able to see that stronger left hand. That forearm is already turned. So now as I get set up and go back, the forearm's already in the position it wants to be in. Now it doesn't necessarily need to turn and rotate. So if we're looking at kind of influences of opening that club face very early on in backswing, that is definitively one of them. It is how the lead hand sits on the golf club. The trail hand is a similar influence. If we were to look and have that trail hand maybe too far over, so wrapped over the golf club like this, again, that first move might be that forearm to rotate back to feel more comfortable. So really looking at how those hands sit on the golf club, really getting thumbs out, pointing thumbs in is more where we'd like to have both those forearms and those hands sit, more in a neutral position. That way they're not going to be influenced or not going to be encouraged to roll open as they go back. So that's really the first big influence in terms of that face opening, is the hand position on the handle at setup. So looking at other influences that might cause me to open the club face in backswing, and what we're going to talk about now is actually the body movement. And we're more looking at a lack of movement that causes the face to open. So let's talk about it. So as I get set up here, what I see sometimes from players is as they come back, we don't have a lot of turn in the body. So in the hips or the pelvis or in the rib cage. And as I get to a certain point, if I don't turn and rotate my body, I'm going to stop right here. That's the furthest I can travel. Now, because I've stopped right here and I can't turn my body anymore, what I'm going to do is that right elbow is going to start pulling behind me to get the club to travel further back. And when it does that, it's going to put a force on the handle that causes the face to get a little bit more open. So the lack of turning or rotation can actually cause the face to open. So looking at your own swing, again, this kind of course being very specific to players, you want to look and identify if this is you. So what you'll see is as you go back, that right hip pocket won't really turn. It might turn a little bit here, but from here, you'll look at that right rib cage or that right seam on your shirt, no turn, no rotation. Looks like it's very closed off. As you get to here, that right elbow is going to start pulling behind you, low, that elbow bone pulling behind you, opening that left wrist, getting that left wrist to be in a cup position, opening that face, and then as we come down again, coming down across the golf ball, creating that slide pattern, or slice pattern, excuse me. So for those players, we need to enact a little bit of rotation, okay? So a little bit of getting that to turn. So here's what we would do. We'd get set up into our position here. From there, I take my left hand and put it underneath my right armpit, okay? So just nicely in there. I'm not tucking it, I'm not squeezing it, just nicely in there. And as I go back, I'm gonna push on my rib cage to get it to turn as I go around. So I'm actually really feeling like my right fingers, or my left fingers, excuse me, are pushing my rib cage around behind me. That creates the rotation early to create the space. Now I can actually allow my hands to hinge up without feeling like my elbow is pulling behind me. So very important when we're looking at this. If I did get set up, and that is my issue where I pull that elbow too far behind, get set up, left hand, lead hand off the club, underneath my trail armpit or tricep there, and just pushing, using my lead hand to move my upper rib cage around to create that space. Now you can see that right hip pocket has moved a lot more, and I get that freedom of position, and now that face doesn't rotate open as I come down. So again, that's really the second thing we look at. The second influence in terms of face rotation is actually a lack of rotation in the body. So when looking at the last possible influence for the face to be rotating open in backswing, it simply is how we like to move our wrists and our forearms. So many players with the idea that moving their forearms in this manner, where we would have that face a little bit more closed, is very restrictive, or can be a little bit impinging on that trail or lead wrist. So as they go back, really allowing those wrists, especially that lead wrist, to get quite cupped, that trail wrist even to get a little bit what we call flexed, so nearly moving in this direction. So when we would look at that, what can we do to really prevent that from happening? Well, a lot of mirror work would really go into that, right? So looking and kind of nearly the iPad being my mirror, looking back as I go back, okay, can I keep my wrist in those positions? Again, not really needing to go here where it's massively bowed and flexed to shallow it, but just looking at maintaining what I have at the start. So we talked about the grip being an influence, but what happens if the grip is good and we're still rolling that face open? So a nice little drill for really exploring that can be if we get set up here, and from here, let's just create the wrist hinge early. So let's nearly get it out of the way. So I get set up, create that wrist set there, just with my wrist in that movement, and then from here I'm just going to turn my chest up to the top of the backswing. So again, not creating a crazy amount of flexion in my lead wrist or extension in my trail, but just creating enough at the setup position. So again, as I get set up here, really just creating that hinge at the start, getting that shaft parallel to where I want to go, good wrist position, and then from there just turning my chest and just swinging out, okay? Again, nice little drill to do in terms of feeling it. So let's try that one more time. So we're just going to get this set up and we'll go, okay, just using the mid-arm here, create that wrist hinge there, and from there I'm just really turning my chest and then all the way through to target, just getting those wrist positions a little bit more structured up top. So really when we're looking at this, just playing around with the actual very, very naturally, that's what I like to do. Okay, and that's something that sometimes we kind of misplace or kind of forget when we're looking at swing techniques. This player just likes to open the wrist in that manner. So that's just training in the wrists, okay, training in the hands, educating them how to move and what they want to do. So that nice idea of really creating it early and then hanging onto it in backswing to create what you want on the way down. So that will be the last influence we talk about really when it comes to face. There are many, many more, too many to cover in this course, but they'll be three of the main influences that I see on the lesson tee.